Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Christine, and I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at CAR Connect. I'll be your facilitator today, and I'm genuinely glad you're here. So whether you've joined because the topic affects someone you love, or because you're navigating something yourself, or simply because you want to understand it better, all of those reasons matter, and all of them are welcome in this room. This is a safe space. So before we begin, a brief content note. So today's conversation, they will all touch on substance use, addiction, trauma, and grief. We will handle it all with care, but I want you to know in advance that those themes are present. And if at any point you need to step away, please do so. And if anything resonates with you in a way that feels personal, our team at CAR Connect is here. And details will be shared at the close of the session. In the session, you can also share anonymous questions through the Q&A button, or you can ask in the chat. And I'm joined here today by two people who, between them, bring something that I think is rare and genuinely powerful, a clinical depth on one side and lived experience on the other. So we have Danny Cleary, the guy with, are you in Bahamas? I think it looks like that, at least. So Danny Cleary is an addiction counselor with years of direct clinical experience, working with people across different industries and walks of life. Danny has worked with drug and alcohol support services in Ireland, and he understands not just the pattern of substance use, but also the roots of it, the trauma, the grief, the neurodevelopmental factors that so often sit underneath. Danny is here to anchor us in reality and to help us see this issue clearly and without judgment. Danny, welcome. And then there's Tobin Coles. Yeah, thank you. And then there's Tobin Coles, who's CAR Connect's Chief Revenue Officer, and who is someone who has lived through addiction and come out on the other side. And to you, Tobin, I want to say this directly. The fact that you are willing to sit here today and speak openly about your experience, that's not a small thing. So for anyone in this audience who's struggling or who's afraid of what asking for help might cost them, you being here already tells them something important. We're glad to have you here and welcome.
Thank you. You can't make me emotional before the start of this, Christine. Thank you for this.
Yeah, so over the next 35 minutes or so, we're going to move through 5 themes together. We'll start by setting the scene, looking at how common addiction really is and what it actually looks like in the workplaces across every sector. We'll then go deeper into the role of trauma, grief, and neurodiversity in addiction, because understanding why matters enormously. And from there, we move into the human reality, the shame, the silence, the moments that something has to change. And then we get practical about what workplaces actually can do. How to support someone, how to build cultures where people feel safe enough to ask for help before things reach a crisis point. And then we'll close with something I think we all really need, and that is hope. Because recovery is real, and it doesn't have to mean the end of anything good in your life. It doesn't have to be that way. And there will be time for your questions afterwards. So again, use the Q&A function as we go. We will get to as many as we can. We have a bunch of questions that we are going to go through, so time is quite limited, but please, we try to get through them, as many as we can. But I want you to know also that Danny is on as, most of our hubs. So if there's anything, you can always reach out to Danny as well, and us. All right, let's begin. I would like to direct my first question to you, Danny. So addiction and substance use in the workplace is something that tends to stay hidden. and yet it touches every industry and every level of an organization. So from your work as a counselor, how common is this, and what does it actually look like day to day?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks, Christine. I'd say it's hidden in plain sight, is what I'd say. If we look at some statistics, we've got 20% of workers struggle with substance use disorder, mainly alcohol, drugs, prescription medication. Also, we know that 70% of people with a substance use disorder are in employment. And that information comes from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAOSA. So people are managing substances are still showing up. And when an issue arises, employees are probably due to fear until the situation is obvious for everybody to see, which is the progression of an addiction. And then, one of the main things that we need to look at as an employer or EAP or somebody who might be supporting somebody is, do we support the or discipline them? In Ireland, we have a very unique situation where we have a high level of substance use within, public service jobs. A lot of them are quite stressful. We have nursing, we have prison officers, we have guards, and we've a lot of other industries within Ireland where people are using substances just to cope. We've got high functioning addiction. This can lead to physical, mental health problems. And what is the indicator in relation to somebody changing? Well, somebody changes because there's a deterioration in their work. There's absenteeism, there's presenteeism, their mood changes, their focus, and maybe strains. The cost sometimes can be low productivity, absenteeism, safety issues, especially around the construction industry, and turnover of staff. So when we look European Union Drugs Agency and ask them what do they recommend for people, what they say is that EAP and counselling is really, really good. Because, if we look at what goes on, especially in Ireland, which would be my main area of work, how do we celebrate something in work? How do we celebrate a promotion? How do we celebrate somebody getting a new contract or whatever? And a lot of it revolves around, alcohol. So our culture needs to be looked at as well as part of this. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. So when most people hear substance abuse at work, they may think, like you mentioned, of a very specific image. But the reality is more complicated, isn't it? What substances and patterns do you see most often? And what are there any surprises that people may not know of? For example, what are you seeing around the combination of, for example, alcohol and cocaine?
Okay, well, when I hear this substance abuse at work, people might think of a very specific image, but the reality is more complicated. So, what substance and patterns do we see most often? And there are any that might surprise. So, when we look in relation to people turning up, okay, what might happen is people might turn up showing the effects from the night before, or is what we're looking at is somebody indulging on the job. So people in relation to cocaine that I work with tell me that they might have a little bump during the day, is where they might just do a little bit of coke during the day, just to as they say, take the edge off. And these are more easily hidden than alcohol. Somebody is drinking on the job, the effects of alcohol, the smell of the alcohol. So it's more complicated due to the ways that people can use these substances, the availability in the workplace and the restrictions for employments and employees. Is there random drug testing? Are people made aware that it's going to be a drug test next week? So people say, well, I won't use. People are always trying to stay one step ahead to manage whatever substance they are. And I recently seen some medication bottle. I just happened to look at it, and I knew this was going to be on in a couple of weeks. And it said something like, instant pain relief, long lasting. And I thought, anybody out there that has anything going on in their life, we want just something to take the edge off,
Yeah.
It can be influenced as well by the demographics, by the culture, by the industry. And the industries that we look at would be where, the building, the construction regulations in relation to things like, safety. safety on site, alcohol, then cannabis, solpadeine. The solpadeine would be because of the paracetamol and the codeine in it. If you look at alcohol as well, it's most common. It's freely available. It's legal if you're over 18, And then we talk about the coca-ethylene piece. We have the alcohol and cocaine. So I'm seeing a huge rise in this area. People drink. They want to stay out drinking longer. Somebody in the company might have cocaine. They use a bit of cocaine. It allows them to drink a bit more. And the availability cocaine in Ireland has got to a frightening place. I think Ireland ranks currently either third or fourth in the world for cocaine use,
Yeah.
And one of the things that this is leading to many physical and mental health issues in psychosis. I work with people who, as Harry Potter said, he was petrified. I deal with people who are petrified because they use recreational drugs at the weekend, but then come Tuesday or Wednesday the following week, they may have psychosis. And this is really frightening for them.
Yeah. And I think this is, you're talking about Ireland, but I think this is a global and a very international thing. And this is maybe for both of you. So there is a growing evidence of a deep connection between neurodiversity. So I would like to touch on that a little bit. So conditions like HDHD, autism, and dyslexia. And they have shown to have heightened vulnerability to addiction. And then there's the role of trauma and grief, like we've mentioned before, adverse childhood experiences, loss, violence, or chronic stress. Like I said, it's maybe for both of you. Can you help us understand those relationships? Why are people who are neurodivergent or who carry unprocessed trauma or grief more likely to develop a problematic relationship with substances? And what does it mean for how we respond to them? I know there are many questions in one question. Yeah.
I'll give it a go from a lived experience point of view.
Yeah.
So look, actually it's interesting. So for me, it was cocaine and alcohol in combination. And one was frequently the cause of poor decision making with the other. So just contextually, so we all know where we are. They're a horrible combination together. But what was really, I spent months in rehab, and rehab's a very prescriptive place where you work through a pattern. But what was really interesting in everybody's rehab journey, everybody was asked to talk through the things, the pain points that they'd had in their life. No context, just walk through them. And what was really interesting to see, there was a clear route between the trauma that people had been through in their lives and their propensity and level of addiction. So I was with people in there that had gone through, really traumatic childhoods. And it was obvious that the reason that they were in the level of addiction they were was just pain relief to the trauma they've been through. And what's fascinating in the work that I do now, so talking about it more generally, is we know that 1 in 4 addicts is neurodivergent. But we also know that 3 in 4 have had some sort of traumatic experience in their life. And we also know now that late onset neurodivergence is caused by trauma. So you can put all of that together and just, for me, the simple conclusion for me, the way that it was playing out for me was, it was the most available and fast route for me to deal with my own trauma and neurodivergence. I had no other place to go, Christine, and the alcohol I could get from my corner shop, and it's so easy to go and get and go and get the cocaine as well. So it is such a clear link between the two, exacerbated by the issues with, screening and testing and everything else that goes on with any sort of neurodivergence as well. But it absolutely underpinned my journey through addiction. Once I got clean, discovering those things was just, it was a breakthrough moment for me.
Yeah. And from a clinical perspective, Danny, is there something that resonates also with you and what you see in your work?
Yeah, well, following on from what Tobin says there, we have trauma, we've got neurodiversity, and we've got substance use. So when you put them all together, we
Yeah.
tackle first. Somebody presents, and it's like, okay, they present with something, and it might be the neurodiversity that's overwhelming at the moment, but they're also in the background. The coping mechanism that they're using some substances, and then
Mm-hmm.
trauma from, I was dealing with somebody recently. I was saying, Danny, I've no childhood trauma, but when we got to about 20, there was a couple of things that occurred. So, often people feel or believe something is going on internally, so they feel
Mm-hmm.
anxious.
Yeah.
But they're not quite sure, about how they feel or believe that they're perceived as different. So isolation then can become a coping mechanism that leads to loneliness. And this unknown can be unsettling for people. This is where self-medication comes in, and alcohol or drugs, we know are very, very freely available.
Mm-hmm.
And it can bring a less troubled existence in the short term, but long term, the difficulties do arrive and the trauma doesn't go away,
Yeah. Yeah.
People also think by using substances that they can fit in, Sorry, Christine.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I just it resonates so with me, from my own therapeutical work. The self medication, it's definitely used as such. But Tobin, I don't want to. I really want to dive better into. So you're someone who has been through this personally, and you're now sitting here as a senior leader at Car Connect, talking about it openly. And just again, that in itself is remarkable. Can you take us back some years? What did it feel like when you were in it? And was there a moment when you knew something had to change?
Oh, yeah. Yes, there was a moment. I'll come to that. I think that for me, alcohol had played quite a large part of my life in any case, socially. I came from a very sociable family, and it was frequently around. I had my first experiences alcohol at a very young age because I could get access to it. But there was a moment, Christine, that I'll never forget, and it's something actually that I would like to say to everybody that's listening to this, which is a really important part of alcohol use, is that the feeling that I had when I drank was never euphoria, or it wasn't a hedonistic kind of let's go and party. I felt normal. And I'm looking back at that now. I didn't know that at the time, but at the time, when I drank, I felt like a normal human. I think that underpins a lot
But
with.
that was kind of like your baseline.
It's
You
my
found your baseline. Yeah.
So, and then
interesting. Yeah.
I felt normal when I did this. I would just do it more and more. And look at the long timeline. That I went from social drinker to social and binge drinker to functioning addict with a really good career. But if you can imagine it as a curve, it was kind of going down like this, but at the end it dropped, at an alarming rate. And I think that there was a moment when I knew I was really in trouble. But the moment, the rock bottom moment, there were two parts to it. The first bit, I was crossing lines I never thought I would cross, just in terms of my behavior, risky behavior, all of those type of things. But the ultimate moment was my middle daughter stood in front of me saying, I don't recognize you. Your eyes don't look the same. And I think that it was an utterly heartbreaking moment of knowing how far I had gone, but seeing the pain she was in at the time. And I think then I knew I needed to sort something else. And we'll touch on this, no doubt. At the time, the support mechanisms around me were awful and difficult to access. And for the grace of God, Christine, because I had access to a little bit of money at the time and I could find my way through. But, really, it was a very difficult negotiation. And I know I'm probably taking up too much time here, so I'm going to finish.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Absolutely.
But I no doubt we might talk a little bit more about the treatment process itself. But what I would say is once I was in the wheels of treatment, possibility and hope just lifted in front of me. I could see it. directly in front, and I had something to go towards. And the feeling of having come out of the other side. So I suppose I was in active addiction for a decade. Coming out of the other side and seeing hope there for the first time was just an astonishing thing to be able to see, and it was a real motivation. But then actually on the other side, I've now been in recovery for 9 years. It's also understanding the work that continues to need to be put in to stay in there. Working with people like Danny, I think about it like I have a chronic condition like epilepsy. I constantly need to manage it, or it feels like that, and that's what I need to do. I need to keep myself in check. So it was a difficult time. I'd really like to just acknowledge how difficult it was for people around me, not just for me, as well. But the feeling of positivity and hope when you get in and start moving through it's a feeling I find hard to describe in words.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. And I think, one of the biggest barriers of seeking help is shame. We hear that a lot. The fear of what people will think. You might lose your job, of being seen as weak, and I would like to say, for someone listening today who might be recognizing themselves in this conversation, is there anything, and this may be to both of you, is there anything you would want them to know, both from a person with the lived experience, but also, Danny, you said, Tobin, and we will touch on it a little bit later, you had some funds. That's not always available to everyone, and we will get to that. But is there anything you would like people to know when they're in the moment, in the situation? They want to seek help, but there's kind of like a barrier.
There's hope, always.
Yeah.
You're not broken at all. In fact, as Danny was just really eloquently describing, sometimes this is the fastest pain relief any of us can find.
Yeah.
Regardless what anyone might be thinking or say, actually, in the main, most people around you will be hugely caring and wanted to support you through. Mm-hmm. Don't underestimate the power of the fellowships like AA and NA and others, and how wonderful and welcoming they are in bringing people in and putting an arm around people. But the main thing is, it's awful in the moment. Hope is there on the other side. Danny.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Tobin. And just to follow on from what you've just said, number one, what I would really, really want people to know is that support is available. The only shame is where people recognize that there is something going on and don't do anything about it. Shame is the belief that as a person, you're bad, you're flawed, you're inadequate. And if we can break down that barrier to let people understand that, what matters most is that this can be a block.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But how about turning that around to put ourselves in at the start of the queue for once? What about saying that I am worth, that I deserve, And somebody, I'd often say to people, when I'm working with somebody, I'd say, you're here and you're saying, what if somebody you knew who was very special to you came to me with this issue? What advice and support might you offer them? Most people have the answers themselves, and then they can use this to seek help for yourself. Whose job, income can be very frightening for people. So silence can often be easier, People often do see themselves as weak. I often wonder why, as remarkable individuals in so many areas of their lives, they can't function without something. So it's to get to the root of that. We talked about trauma, we talked about ACEs, we talked about things like that. So it's how and why do substances have such a hold over people? And sometimes, I've dealt with doctors, I've dealt with barristers and lawyers and accountants and people who are, quite clever and quite well educated. And, they'd often say to me, like, Danny, how has that liquid in that bottle got such a hold over me? And when we go through it and we explain it about acceptance, sometimes it's just for people to understand that there are properties in alcohol that affect the brain, and therefore that's why treatment is almost essential. But again, we look at the That's what dependence is. When we become dependent on something, we get entrenched.
Yeah, you're right. And what are the signs that someone might be struggling? Not just the obvious ones, but the fine signals that a friend or a colleague might miss if they're not looking at them. Are there any subtle signs?
Okay, well, just, you talk about there, not the obvious ones, but the obvious ones might be somebody late, not turning up, below par work, safety concerns, presenteeism, absenteeism, and, leaving employment, people just getting to the end of their tether and saying, look, I'm going to go. But withdrawal, so behavior cannot be seen, avoidance of contact in or outside work, someone's physical appearance, looking fatigued or disheveled or out of character, looking extremely well can be one of the signs where somebody realizes that drink or drugs are having an effect on them. They're conscious of it when they look in the mirror. So, they make sure that they absolutely look their best to present, to ward off people going, I wonder, is there something going on there?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that.
When things, yes, Christine, yeah.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it can be masked as well, because sometimes somebody might have something else going on in their family. There could be a breakdown of a relationship, could be grief, there could be financial issues, So what'll happen is that if anybody says, oh, are you okay, is something going on? It's, oh, well, this is what's going on. But in actual fact, that's not the truth. They're deflecting, to mention something else to avoid that conversation around it's a substance. Again, we look for a change, an adverse change with somebody as to what's going on in the background of their life.
I think for me, Christine, looking back on it now, I think they might have been quite obvious, the changes. So commitments would be broken. I would be late. I think this is quite common for addicts, that lying or subtle mistruths try to come in to deflect on where you've been, what you've been doing. I think, there are the obvious things around, you can smell it on people, but people in active addiction normally are, take care of those type of things, but it really is the behavioral shifts that you start to see quite quickly. I knew I was not reliable anymore.
Yeah, you knew it yourself. Yeah.
I was being erratic and making last minute changes to plans, or the social arrangements that I was booking with people started to revolve much more around being at a pub or being at a drinking event. So all of those in combinations, where in my own brain, I thought, I've got this wired, no one will ever notice. Looking back, I think probably everybody was noticing.
Yeah. And if someone watching today wants to support a friend, a colleague, or, someone they're worried about, but doesn't want to overstep or make things worse, what should they actually do? What's helpful and what should they avoid?
So this question arises more than people think, and it's a real minefield or situation to navigate. Trying to support somebody, firstly, we need to assess the situation, and ask, am I the right person to intervene? I may be, or I may not be, or I may have a lot going on myself, so I might not be the person.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is we need to make sure that we don't make the situation worse for somebody. If the person is making the approach is genuine and empathic, holds a reasonable relationship with the person, then it's possible that you have a good outcome. If we feel we're the right person, we can simply say to the person that I've noticed the change, and that word keeps coming up. I've noticed the change in you, in your attendance, your work appearance, and ask them, what has created this? Say something like, I care about you. I'm concerned about you. Would you like to have a chat about whatever was going on? And depending on the answer, then we'll progress. But it depends on the relationship. We need to know, because another difficulty can arise. Well, so if the person is on your team and you're a manager, is it a friendly, caring chat where you're concerned about the person? Or is it an HR issue? Or could it become a HR issue? How will the employee see it? Will they see that they're supported, or is it a discipline piece? And also in some industries, manufacturing, building, there's a huge safety concern which may arise. And this has to be managed as well. So risk to people. The is, is that to support somebody, we need to show empathy.
Yeah, you're right. Do you have anything to add to that, Tobin? Or?
Yeah, look, I think that it's a very difficult and complicated thing to try and do. All I can say is that the people around me that approached it with care and with sensitivity got through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that as much as I railed against it at times, it was having an effect. It were people were getting through. And I think that every single intervention that anyone around me took made an impact. I do agree with Danny. There's a difficult line somewhere, but I just keep coming back to, if we think about this not as an addiction, which has garnered so many different views and opinions over the years, and just look at it like a chronic illness. What would you do if someone had just said, I've just found out that I am epileptic, or, what would you do in that? How would you support in that moment, and what care would you give them? I think it does get through, and I think that for me, I was screaming inside my head for help, and really struggled to know how to approach anyone, because the shame was just everywhere in everything that I did.
All consuming.
And all we can do, Christine, is our best sometimes in helping people and direct them to appropriate support and help around them. But I think that every intervention someone took with me, even if I looked furious at the time, had a positive impact.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. So, leading to the question from your own experience, what somebody is calling me in the middle of a webinar. How dare you? And what do you see from working with the organization now? What does it actually take to build a workplace culture where people feel safe enough to ask for help before things reaches crisis point?
Yeah, look,
and this is a difficulty. It's that we work obviously with a lot of different organizations, but I think this is a common thing.
It is a common thing, and I'll make one quick observation. Actually, is that I'm having more conversations with companies about this over the course of the past 2 years than I've ever had, which probably shows something's happening. The problem that we have with this is the way that substances and alcohol appear both in HR policy and disciplinary procedures, and also as a health issue. And all I will say is that the minute, in the work that we do with companies, the minute we can split those things as far apart as we possibly can, the easier it will become. So let's forget the disciplinary side of things, of someone operating tools when they're drunk. And, that's a very serious thing. Let's park that over there. Let's start with this bit over here, which is, we have people in desperate need of help. And again, as I've said a couple of times, let's now reframe this as a mental health issue, not as a substance and alcohol issue. Let's create the same pathways and this same way of people being able to bring this forwards as if they were dealing with a bereavement in the family or a high episode of anxiety. And let's just destigmatize it completely. Let's recognize, as Danny and yourself, Christine, and I have said all the way through this, people are trying to remediate pain using alcohol. Let's stop talking about that. Let's focus on, what's the pain? What is it that you're trying to do?
The root cause.
Let's get into that, and let's create it. Yeah. I think when, as companies and advisors, we manage to get into that framework of conversation, we'll make progress quickly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if we continue with the help, so Car Connect provides workplace well-being to support organization across many different sectors, as we've said here. And I'm just thinking, for someone who's never engaged with anything like that, or who's skeptical, what does it actually look like? How does someone access it? And what happens when they do? And I can say, I can start out by saying, I'm in charge, I take care of our professional, and I know we have, Danny is here, and we have amazing group of professionals that are able to, they might not be addiction counselor, but they work with trauma, they work with bereavement, and, we have all these amazing professional. But what does this look like at Car Connect? How, and how does somebody access it?
Do you want me to take that?
I think this is a good one for you.
Yeah. What does it feel like once the fear has passed and the trepidation of doing it? Once you take that first step, it truly is a journey of growth and discovery.
Yeah.
And that the hardest bit is the first step. And I have found for myself personally, and with people that we've helped through this process, is that there's a moment when for the first time you're able to talk to someone as trained as Danny, who gets this and understands it. You're able to talk in a language that you've been unable to in any other facility or aspect of your life, and there's no judgment coming back the other way. There's none. There is just an open ear of how do I help you and how do I support you through this. And I'd add just one final thing to that, is that for me, it was really important to me that once I'd gone through and, detox and got through and started, I wanted to live a normal life again. And I would just add one bit to it to say, we need to then facilitate people to stay in these lines of treatment and therapy beyond that initial holding for a long period of time, because as you reintegrate back into normal life, things get more complex and difficult, and stress and work and partners and relationships and children come flying back at you again. And I think it's really important to stay grounded in this support facility that we're talking about here and building.
Yeah. And on that note, Danny, one concern we hear is that the proper treatment is only for people who can afford it. And Tobin has touched on it a little bit here. The reality of long-term treatment programs, private residential care, extended aftercare, it can feel completely out of reach for many people. And for someone listening today who doesn't have those resources, what pathways actually exist, and what role does community support like fellowship groups play in the long-term recovery? And I know also, Tobin, you touched on AA, the importance. So, people who do not have the means maybe to seek treatment. Danny, do you have any recommendation here?
Well, the only proper treatment is the one that works for the individual. And yes, I hear that a lot. However, in fact, there are many who's open to people regarding treatment. While residential is one, there's day programs, there are certain payment plans, there's self-help groups that Tobin mentioned. And also, if people are sincere regarding treatment, will invest in what's available rather than focusing on what is not, and it can be in their best interest to engage to the best of their ability to make and recovery work for them. So what does that look like? So, there are certain treatment centres whereby you pay a very, very small amount of money, like maybe 100 quid or 150 quid a week. They do have aftercare programs, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm currently working for the HSE in a place in Dublin, and we have two groups there. We have an early recovery group, which lasts for 6 to 12 months. And then they come into the aftercare, which I run. And then that's from 6 to 12 months as well. And it's completely free for people who engage through a day program there. In Ireland, we have two places, Coolware and Coolmine. They're very cost effective as well. Fellowship plays a vital role in sustaining and assisting individuals to remain substance free. I often hear about, them groups are not for me. The old GOD word is sometimes mentioned as well, but some of the happiest and most peaceful people that I know are long-term attendees. So there is AA, there's Smart Recovery, there's another one called Life Ring, and then there is play, that mentioned there as well in relation to CA, NA, there are other groups as well. the treatments that are offered, mainly by the EAP, are short-term. They're short-term solution-focused therapies, usually 6 sessions to an employee to address own issue, personal or work. This can be highly useful and supportive to the individual to address the current issue and support them returning to normal. However, this will not be enough to address a substance use disorder. If anyone wants to look up YouTube, there's a fantastic video of a little bird called Nuggets. It's got 30 million plus hits on YouTube, and it's an animated video. And it's good to see the progression of, substance use disorder.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll make sure to get the link from you.
Yes, I will indeed.
Yeah.
But one of the things I looked up, Christine, was around Iceland and what was going on there. So they have a thing called the Icelandic model, globally recognized for success in reducing teenage substance use. I'm aware that this is an adult platform, but teenagers are the workforce of the future, And in 1998, they found that teenagers were drinking, in relation to consuming alcohol in the previous month, it was up at about 42%. In 2016, when they'd done a further study, it was at 5%. And what did they put it down to? Community and parental involvement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're actually in Iceland, we're quite proud of this initiative. It's called Planet Youth, and it's been taught all over the world in universities and implemented in many other countries. And you're right. We're talking mostly about possibilities in Ireland, but obviously there are different treatment facilities, different approaches to it, depending on countries. But I would just want to let everyone know that we will be sharing, after, you will all get an email with a list of facilities and communities that are available. But we're getting closer to our questions, but Tobin, you are a living proof that recovery is possible and that it doesn't mean the end of ambition, career, or connection. What does life look now? I know you have a little son, but what does it look now on the other side of it? And what do you wish you had known while you were struggling?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll come back to that latter bit about what I wish I had known at the time. But life is pretty wonderful. You're absolutely right. I recently got married. I have a son. I have 3 beautiful children from my past relationship who I love dearly. They went through a lot. So we are rebuilding there. But I think that I was always from the outset, I wanted to get some sort of normality of life back again. I wanted to have a career, and I felt my story was unfinished, Christine. But I did it with great care as well, in the sense that I know the risk factors for me, and when things, I put myself in situations which are unhelpful, and you and I have worked together long enough now to know that commonly when there's a work event, I disappear in the evening. I don't say goodbye. The evening comes to a point where everybody's enjoying themselves. I pull the eject handle. So I know how to care for myself now and how to look after myself. I have what I call scaffolding that I've built around me. And that's a combination of, medication, and I have a Lumi pool outside this office where I go and dunk myself in cold water. And
love that.
I stay rooted in the fellowships. I can't speak highly enough of AA and NA and the others. I go as often as I can. And whenever I'm in one, Christine, I feel like I'm in and around people that get me.
That's amazing to hear. Amazing
like
to hear.
Every now and again, I need to go and sit with other addicts and people in recovery. We sit and look at each other and just have a giggle about how tricky the basic things in life can sometimes be. But
peer support is so important. We know that from all kinds of research. So as we come to close, if someone listening today, and this is maybe to you, Danny, and or both of you, and something has resonated with them for themselves or for someone they care about, what is the one thing you would want them to do within the next 24 hours?
I'd say the first thing I'd say is reflect on being here today, begin the conversation. It's for you. If it's for you personally, look at the common denominator in your life for negative things that are happening, work, relationship, finances, physical or mental health. The list is endless, by the way. It will most likely be you and a substance, But what a great relief and revelation that is to go, there isn't something wrong with me. I have a substance use disorder. And the next question is, can I do something about it? And we heard from Tobin's, personal experience, and from what I bring and what you talk about as well, yes, there is a solution to this. If it's somebody else, I would say, plan how and what you intend to say to the person. Choose an appropriate time to begin the conversation. And remember, substance use is giving up everything. One thing. Recovery is giving up one thing for everything. Thanks.
That's a beautiful thing to say. And thank you, both of you. And I just want to sit with that for a moment, because you've both said, it's exactly why this conversation matters, not just the statistics or the policy framework. It's that, what you just said, Denny. And the idea that the one thing you can do in the next 24 hours is something small and human and within reach. So it's so important. So thank you for that. I also want to say to everyone, who's listening, on behalf of everyone who's listening, thank you to both of you for the generosity you've shown here today. Danny, for the clarity and the compassion you bring to this work. It's been a pleasure working with you for the years we've been working together. And Tobin, for your honesty, for that kind of honesty costs something, and it gives something back to people who really like it or who really need it, So thank you both. And, we now have time for your question. And I would love for this section to feel like a real conversation. I'll be reading your questions out loud, so give me a moment while I read them. If you haven't, put your question in, and if you want to ask something, please do use the Q&A function. If you haven't already, you're also welcome to submit anonymously. There's no question that is too basic, too personal, too uncomfortable for this space. No question like that. And if something has come up for you today, this is the moment to put it in this room. Yeah. And a couple of things to note. Our panelists, they will, Tobin and Danny, they will engage with your questions as openly as they can. And there may be some they will handle carefully or redirect. And I want to tell you that is not avoidance, it's care. And for anyone who has found today's conversation bringing up something personal, I want to say our team at Car Connect is monitoring the chat, and support is available. You don't have to wait until the end. All right, let me see the questions. I'm gonna
fire away, Christine.
Yeah. So, question one here. So, any ideas on how to break down the stigma for people seeking help for help-seeking people with substance use, particularly among the masculine-dominated cultures? This is so good. For example, construction, emergency services. The work is particularly high risk, and colleagues feel unsafe when someone might be under the influence, yet they know the implication of speaking up might be detrimental for all.
Well, as a starting question, that's a pretty good one. I'm sure Danny has a view on this. I'll just go from some experience. I am a man, so I've been in this situation of understanding the perhaps some of the unique pressures that masculinity can put around it. The destigmatization of it, though, is really important in that whatever the industry type is, I think it's about, and we've talked about it previously, taking away some of the wordings we use. So around, addiction and alcoholism, they can be really quite divisive words sometimes. And I think that engendering a conversation which is much more about lifestyle and looking after your health and mental health can be an easier framework for people to start having those conversations in. I'm sure Danny's got a different view to me on that, though.
Not in fact, Tobin, no. I think when we talk about stigma, I think there's an onus on us all to educate ourselves more, to be more aware, to look at why things are going on. The question was, there around male industries, etc. It can be that macho piece, but I think the barriers are being broken down significantly, where conversations are being had, educational pieces are being provided to people, and I think the awareness and historically and culturally in Ireland, it was the thing to do for males to go to the pub and trash out their issues or their trauma or their problems, whatever it might be. Now people are availing of EAP and availing of more positive supports rather than alcohol or drugs. But again, I think part of it is a culture piece, whereby what we need to do is we need to encourage somebody who is behaving in that manner to open their mind to realize that there is another way. Maybe that's historically how things were dealt with, but change is very, very needed.
Yeah. Another question here. I have heard said it is possible to drink alcoholically without being an alcoholic. Would you guys agree with that?
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, it is.
There are people who are heavy drinkers, and they drink quite a substantial amount of alcohol, yet they don't have all the traits of being, who has a substance use disorder. My understanding is that once you are, once you have a substance use disorder, i.e., alcoholic, that your dependence has increased, and you are in a situation whereby you need alcohol to function. People who have high tolerance for alcohol and are not alcoholic, I've often heard it being said in relation to some an alcoholic or somebody not being an alcoholic. It's a little bit like for a female being pregnant. You either are pregnant or you're not. There's no in between.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I want to mention, we have so many questions. I know we will not be able to go through all of them, so I will be choosing randomly some questions, but I want to say this. What we can do is that we can answer them in a written format, and then because we will be sending emails out, but I'm very sorry, time wise we won't be able to go through all of them, but I'm going to choose another here. So is peer support important for young people who are in addiction, or does it create additional risk for them to form groups that can share substances?
I saw that question flash up as we were chatting, and I thought, if you're going to ask that, I want to answer it.
Yes.
I want to tackle this straight on.
Yeah.
It depends on the peer group. And I can tell you, as someone in recovery, any time I spend with other addicts in recovery is time beautifully spent. And I cannot convey with enough emotion how empowering it is to be stood in a room of other people that are going through this, have been through this, and share experiences. Because in the end, Christine, they are the people that get it and understand it. And there is a collective, it takes a village, right? It takes a village.
Yeah.
And the power of being in a room with other people and seeing that lived experience, sharing stories of disaster and hope simultaneously, and keeping moving forwards is I can't imagine my recovery without it. No doubt, though, that there are toxic peer groups that you can be in. So it's about choosing the right one. And I keep saying it, I cannot advocate enough the fellowships and the support groups that people, and plenty have been popping up on the chats here as we've been talking, of being in the room with like-minded people sharing your shared experiences.
Yeah, very good. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, peer groups are essential. This is how people learn, how people are guided. This is how people understand. This is how people understand themselves. Because what happens is now they've got a barometer to match as to how their behavior is, how they're fitting in socially, and how they're progressing in life. A documentary on the Irish National Channel last week, RTE, called Boy, B-O-I. It's one of U2's most famous albums. And the picture on the front of it is a guy called Rowan, R-O-W-A-N is the surname of the family. But one of the guys in the family became a heroin addict. And it's all his story and his journey about as to why. So when he was 11 years of age, he went into Talbot Street with his dad in the car. They pulled up, there was an explosion, and there was like 20 or 30 people killed. And he visually saw at a young age, things that a child shouldn't see. So in the context of the world that we're living in at the moment, with so much war going on and so much unrest, people wanted to watch that. It shows the trauma he experienced. It showed that he had been smoking a bit of cannabis, but then decided, to go on to harder drugs. And when we talk about the peer piece, and that was that question was about, he lived in what I would call eccentric home. They didn't have cats and dogs as pets. They had monkeys and snakes. They used to cycle around on unicycles. They were a very, very eccentric family. But this kid, one of the people that ended up doing the documentary, and peer, what was the peer support for him at the time? It was people who provided drink and drugs for him. That became his coping mechanism.
Very interesting. So we're coming to an end of our time together, and I find myself not quite wanting to let this conversation go. And I have a feeling that we will be doing more webinars on this topic, or even gaming. We've been discussing that as well. And what we have covered today, it isn't an easy territory at all. Addiction in the workplace, the silence around it, the shame that keeps people stuck, the grief and the trauma and the neurodiversity that we have spoken about often sits at the root of it and unseen. And also we've covered the cultures, particularly in specific industry. There has been mention of, for example, the construction industry here. And yet we've also heard something else today. We've heard that recovery is real. People rebuild. Tobin is a living example of that, and that workplaces can change. And that there are pathways, even for someone who's, struggling right now. So that is definitely worth holding on to. And I want to close with a direct word to anyone listening today who recognized something in themselves during this conversation. To you, I want to say, you don't have to have it figured out. You don't have to be at rock bottom. You don't have to be certain. You just have to take one step. And as both Danny and Tobin have said here today, that step can be very small. A phone call, a conversation, typing something into a search bar at midnight when no one is watching you. That counts, and it counts enormously. And also a few things before we close. So Cara Connect's workplace services are available to organizations across Ireland, UK, and the EU area. And if you are an employee wondering whether your organization has access, it costs nothing to ask. We're here. Confidentiality is built into everything we do. And your employer does not need to know the specific of what brings you to a session in Cara Connect in the Wellbeing Hubs. And if you are an employer or an HR leader, and today has prompted you to think differently about what your organization offers, reach out. We are in the process of building something quite new and innovative around substance use and alcoholism, so please reach out to us, and the link is to find out more talking to us. And for anyone that needs support right now, whether for yourself or someone you care about, please don't close this window without noting down the resources that are being shared in the chat. We will, like I mentioned previously, we will also be sending out an email. You don't have to act today, but keep them somewhere where you can find them. So to you guys, Danny and Tobin, two people who showed up here today with honesty, expertise, and real humanity, I'm grateful for both of you. I truly am. And thank you for every single person who joined us. The fact that you were here, that you gave us your time and your attention, it matters more than you know. Take care of yourselves, everyone, and take care of each other.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Christine. Thanks, Dan.
Kristen, just to mention Paulina in the background, who has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Paulina.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Tobin. Thanks, Kristen.